Greetings, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 elements, how they function in our lives and in the process of healing and transformation. This concept of the 5 elements is very ancient. You'll find it all over the world in just about every culture or tradition. In the Western esoteric and metaphysical traditions, we have the 5 elements designated as earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Ether representing spirit, or what's called the quintessence, the 5th element. In the Orient, in the Chinese tradition, the 5 elements would be earth, water, fire, wood, and metal. These concepts of elements imply that these are elements of life and experience. So all of these elements are part of how creation manifests, how energy is transformed, or how it moves through the process of life. I'd like us to explore a little bit more about this and consider how these elements are functioning and operating in each of our own lives, both on a physical, psychological, and spiritual level. The earth element is the element that pertains most to the physical plane, to our physical activity, our physical strength. The water element has a lot to do with emotions, with flowing, with passion. The fire element has a lot to do with action. The air element has a lot to do with the mental plane, has a lot to do with thought, with communication. And the ether is the element that relates to the spiritual realm, in a sense to the source or origin and to the culmination point of this process of life. So we could think of spirit as that form of energy which comes down or descends toward the physical plane, and then through this physical life process, that energy then begins to ascend and return to its spiritual source. Energy is always in motion, it's always being transformed. It's going through cycles, through phases. And so in our own lives and our own personal experiences, we can see where different elements may come to the forefront, where a certain element may be more important or vital at a particular time or in a particular situation. For example, there are times when we need to focus on building our physical strength. So we might be exercising, we might be going to the gym, we might be paying a great deal of attention to the foods that we're consuming. That all has a lot to do with this earth element, with our basic life force. There are some times where we're focused a lot on our emotional life, on our relationships, our intimate connections, our sexuality, and this would have more to do with the water element, with that flowing and unifying with our surroundings, with those who are in our environment. The third element I'm referring to is fire. Fire has a lot to do with energy, with this dynamic activity, electricity. Fire is something that isn't just about physical light, but it does have to do with the energy of the digestive area, with digesting food or essentially breaking down those elements of what we eat to extract the nourishment and to eliminate the residue. So fire, if we look at what it does in other contexts, it transforms and breaks things down. So it's an agent of change in that sense. Next, coming up to the air element. Air, of course, is something that's very fluid in the sense of not being attached to anything. If we think of the atmosphere around us, that same atmosphere covers the whole planet. And so we're all connected to that same atmosphere. There isn't really a separation within the atmosphere. It just flows or moves like the wind around the whole planet. So wind is also associated with air. The air is never completely static, it's always moving. Since air is above the earth, it gives a different perspective. So when we're in the air element or the mental plane, we might have a broader view or perspective upon things. We're working more with our mind. This element is, in a sense, the most detached of the elements that we usually deal with in our daily lives. So when we're in our minds more, we may not be caught up as much in emotions. We may not be as involved in physical activity. We're just kind of thinking about things using our ideal, our mental perspective about things, and not necessarily carrying it out through physical action. The element of ether is the one that essentially brings us back to the source, the undivided whole from which the other elemental phases have been derived. All of these elements are within us. We each have the potential to access all of these elemental energies. However, we tend to have different areas where we're more developed or less developed, where we've gained greater mastery or less mastery of a particular element. People will often look at their astrological charts to get some insight into where they're more developed or less developed, what their so-called strengths and weaknesses are. In our lives, we often tend to default or rely upon the areas in which we're more developed. So those who are more air or mentally oriented will tend to react or respond to situations more from that aspect of their being. A person who's more earth-oriented will deal with things more on that physical level. A person who's water-oriented may respond more from the emotional perspective. Whichever of these areas that we've mastered more, we tend to naturally use more. However, life is guiding us to become more balanced. Therefore, it's helpful to look at the other elements, the elements in which we may be less developed, so that we can consciously develop more in those areas and therefore have better access to applying all of these different elemental qualities in our lives, to using these archetypal abilities when they are most needed. Some situations may be best addressed from the air element, others from the water element, others from the fire element, others from the earth element. If we've only really developed or mastered one area well, then we might try to use that particular quality in situations where it's not really the optimal one to use. Life is really about finding that balance, about integrating ourselves, moving toward what we could consider a state of greater wholeness and harmony within ourselves. This also involves finding more harmony with our surroundings, being able to effectively adapt to and address the environments and the relationships that we're interacting with. The 5-element concept is one that we can use as we look at these circumstances and situations. There are times where we may need to really connect more on an emotional level, where we are more empathic and able to tune in to the feelings and emotional states of other people so that we can effectively relate to them or resonate with them. There are other situations where we need to really have more mental understanding, where we need to be able to think about something rather than just impulsively reacting. We might need to look at many different variables, different pieces of information that will help us make decisions. In that context, the mental skills, the air element, would be most called for. There are also situations that require physical strength or action where we're not going to benefit by sitting around and thinking or being extra caring about feelings or compassion. We might be in danger, we might need to protect ourselves, we might need to physically defend against some external threat, we might need to run away from something. In those situations, that earth element, that physical strength, that stamina and endurance may be something that's really vital and valuable. There are also circumstances where really the best approach or best way of relating to what's going on could involve the spiritual realm. We might need to tap into spiritual wisdom to be able to cope with or handle some challenge that we're dealing with. We may need to connect with the spiritual plane to receive some form of guidance, some form of spiritual support or inspiration that will help us move forward along our path. These are just some examples of how the different elements may be helpful or vital in our daily lives. These 5 elements are present in different systems of looking at archetypes. In astrology, each of the astrological signs would correspond with one of the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. Even on the physical plane of chemistry, there have been associations identified between specific chemical elements and the alchemical elements. We have hydrogen, magnesium, calcium, sodium, and potassium, which are very important to our physiology, and each of those elements corresponds with one of the alchemical elements. So if you're looking to balance things on a metaphysical level, there might also be something we can apply on a physical level that helps bring balance to the corresponding physical element. Different foods have different elemental properties. Different colors and sounds can correspond to the different elements. Essential oils, flower essences, other things that are used in the healing arts correspond with these elemental properties. Even the different layers of the aura and the different chakras are often correlated with particular elements. So a particular element may be the main element or dominant element for a particular chakra. There are different teachings, different writings that address those particular issues. I know that this is a lot of information to integrate and process, so take your time, explore the subject further on your own. Be aware of these elements within yourself and how they're manifesting in your life. These elements are present in our environment. So we have water, we have fire, we have air, we have earth. And each of those elements is in some way contributing to our life, to our existence. For those who would like to learn more about holistic health, spirituality, and related subjects, I invite you to visit my website, which is www.phinsights.com. That's PHINSIGHTS.com. For now, I just want to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.